I don't think it's.
All right, welcome everyone. My name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you for joining me. I'd like to welcome you guys to the first CD and Vinyl Guys edition that we're going to do. It's going to be a new series here. And I'd like to welcome my co-host, Chris Propfe, fellow YouTuber here. Thank you for joining me on this.
Thank you so much for having me, Brendan. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely. Sort of the reason for the name here, the CD and Vinyl Guys. I'm sort of the resident CD guy with over 9,000 CDs, and Chris is deep into vinyl, but he certainly loves CDs as well. You've got quite a large collection yourself, so it's...
Yeah, I've got about close to 800 albums, and you know, I don't have as many CDs as you do, but I have about 3,000 CDs. So
yeah, which is quite the collection. So
yeah, yep. And 100 cassettes.
Yeah, yeah, I've got about I don't know, around 150 cassettes, give or take, I think, and about 200 albums. So not as many in vinyl. Definitely sticking more to the CDs. But yeah, so in this, we're thinking, you know, this would cover you know, a bunch of different medium, both in CD and of course vinyl, sort of that aspect of things. We're going to do discussions like this one here, in which we're going to be focusing on Kiss, do album reviews, top 10 and countdown type things, comparative reviews, and just, of course, a whole bunch more sort of stuff. But tonight's episode, first inaugural episode, is going to be a discussion all on Kiss. But before we go any further, I'd just like to say that if you guys are new to my channel in particular, please hit the subscribe button, also comment and like. But also do check out Chris Propfe's channel. I will put a link in the description below this so that you guys can go find his channel as well and check him out. And going forward, we will probably be alternating these CD and Vinyl Guy episodes on both our channels back and forth. So do keep an eye out for that. Subscribe to both of us and you'll be able to stay up to date on all of it. So I thought, kicking things off, we should just talk about or introduce our first experience with Kiss. You know, how is it that we were introduced to Kiss? And so I'll go first on that, just that for me, before I even knew who the band was, and before I bought any albums, that sort of a thing, my introduction to them was seeing some music video, and to this day, I don't even know which one it was, but Gene Simmons playing his Axe bass in makeup. And just as a little kid, man, that hit me. I was like, oh my God, who is this playing an Axe bass? It's got to be the coolest guy ever, kind of a thing. And that stuck with me. It made an impact. And of course, years later, finding out that that was Kiss and so forth. But that was my first experience with them.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you, I mean, talk about masters of imagery. I mean, they were able to just grab you just with their look. I remember being a kid, and a friend of mine, his older brother had Kiss Alive. And this was before I even knew who Kiss was. But just the cover of that album just was amazing to me. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what their music sounded like, but the imagery captivated me. And then, you know, of course, Kiss was all over MTV. And I remember loving the song Tears Are Falling. And I was joking around with you the other day how I thought Paul Stanley was their only singer, because he sang a lot of those, you know, singles in the 80s. And then I kind of went backwards from there. I was like, oh, wow, there's Gene Simmons and he sings some songs. And then there's Peter Criss and Ace Frehley. So I sort of saw the image of Kiss first and then got into their 80s stuff and then kind of moved backward from there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did. I think you would hear that from most people, that it was the imagery. I mean, that's exactly what happened to me. Seeing it, it wasn't the music that drew me into that. It was the imagery of the makeup and that the fact that a bass guitar was shaped like an axe, kind of a thing. But your mention of course, there being multiple vocalists, or all four of the vocalists in Kiss, you know, sang, the original guys, and we'll get to the newer guys too, because they're singing on the later albums. But that brings up a good question, you know, with all the guys singing and them doing those solo albums in 1978, was that a good idea? Was that something, you know, from a marketing standpoint? Probably, but the album certainly didn't do what previous Kiss albums did. What do you think of the solo albums?
You know what? I think it was a good idea because I think by this point, the cracks were starting to show in the Kiss Foundation. And yeah, we had, Peter Criss obviously wanting to sing more songs. Ace was starting to come out of his shell for that.
Right.
And, I think they all sort of wanted to have the spotlight
Right.
for a while. And I think it was kind of almost like it was a good Band-Aid to kind of heal some of the wounds for a little bit.
Right.
They were able to get creative, obviously, because they had 10 songs to spread it out over an album or so. And I think marketing wise, like you had mentioned, I think they were probably one of the one or the only band to release 4 solo albums on the same day. And I mean, marketing wise, it was really
that was brilliant.
Right. I saw you showing the CDs. I showed the
Right.
vinyl versions too. Yeah, I have all the solo albums. What was cool about these albums, and anybody who has these are original pressings, by the way,
Right.
and they all come with posters,
Right.
which is pretty cool. I'll just pull one of these out.
Right. Yours is going to be the bigger.
Yeah, they all came with the posters.
Absolutely.
And they also came with printed inner sleeves.
Oh, cool.
Which was pretty cool. And they also came with an order form where you could order more Kiss memorabilia, and each member had their own order form.
Oh, nice. I never knew that. I'll have to check for that.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard. Like when you seek these out, it's hard to find them with all of those inners.
Right.
I was lucky enough over the last couple of years to find them all. So, but like you were saying on the CD, though, it seems like they reproduced a lot of that, though, which was cool.
Yeah. They reproduced the poster part of it, but they didn't do that particular piece that you have there, or the the order form stuff, which I think would have been great to have included it, even though you couldn't physically order any of that stuff anymore. But
right. So I think marketing wise, it was obviously it was a good idea because they probably made a crap load of money on it, but I don't know if it helped the band.
Mm-hmm.
I mean.
Well, it was one of those things where they all shipped platinum kind of thing. They were big enough to do that. But then, you read deeper into that and you find out that, I don't know, 3/4 worth of those albums were returned later. So they shipped platinum, they got platinum awards, but they didn't actually sell platinum. Now, maybe over the last, 20 plus years, 30 plus years, whatever kind of thing, they've actually sold that amount, but it was a little bit of a hype thing that didn't quite pan out in terms of what the label, I think, thought they would sell on it.
Right.
They, of course, didn't have the hits from everyone's, every solo album off there. I mean, the Ace Frehley and New York Groove, the cover of the Russ Ballard song on there was probably the biggest hit of all of those off there. But for me, I've got to say, I certainly enjoy the other ones, but this Peter Criss's album, and it's a complete different sound than anything else that was going on with Kiss at the time, kind of a thing. Sort of the first foray for them into that more soulful disco-y type sound that was prevalent at that time. Of course, they do that later on the next 2 releases, but I remember.
And I'm sorry, I just cut you off. You can keep going.
I was just going to say, I just remember, as being the big Kiss fan and picking these up, and the other ones were kind of expected. It's like, okay, I knew what I was getting with those, sort of a thing, and it was that. But when I put on that Peter Criss, it was the most different, but it was also the most interesting.
Right. And I want to let everybody out there know, I mean, Brendan and I have really, we were talking the other night, and it's almost like we were saying, it's like we've known each other for years, and we share a lot of the same musical, tastes and likes and even dislikes too. But we were talking last night, and we both said to each other that our favorite Kiss solo record is the Peter Criss album, which is sort of funny because for a lot of people, this is their least favorite. But we both kind of liked the fact that there was that R&B flavor to the album. And, like you were saying, sort of like kind of a hint of disco, that they would get into in albums like Dynasty and Unmasked and things like that. So it's just interesting that you and I sort of share that like of Peter Criss, because I know for a lot of people, they probably bought that album and they're like, I'm never going to listen to this album again because it doesn't
Right.
sound like Kiss.
Right, right. And it didn't have a song that was like Beth on it. So people who
Right.
were buying it thinking they were getting that didn't get that. And I can understand it was the lowest selling of the 4 albums.
Yeah,
out
because
there,
I think the single released was his version of Tossin' and Turnin'.
which I think is a great song. As
And
always,
it's probably the most Kiss sounding on the album.
yeah.
But yeah, the other stuff, yeah, it's just, but I like it because I know the history of Peter Criss. He loves that sound, that Motown, that R&B sound. And I think it was cool for him to show the fans,
Right.
that piece of him.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. He really is into that. I can't recall, is he one of the oldest of the guys in the group? Just for
I'm
his
not
love
sure.
of music and whatnot, but I know that yeah, he's always been into that Motown R&B soul type sound. So definitely wearing his influences on his sleeve there, which is
Well, even his drumming style, I know a lot of people would say, maybe he's not the best drummer, but I think he kind of brought that sort of that soulful swagger to his drumming. That sort of it kind of set Kiss apart a little bit from the other
well,
band.
I've always really liked his vocal styling.
Yeah.
That a little bit gravelly but very soulful style vocals, which is clearly different than the other 3 guys in the band. And I just
Right.
always felt it really stood out to get an entire album of him, because he generally sang the least amount of songs on the Kiss
Right.
album.
Yeah, because you think about the first album,
Right.
and I know. Well, obviously he sings on Black Diamond, but that's the last track on the album. He sings on Nothing to Lose as well too. But kind of to go along with what you were saying, I agree with you. I almost feel like they should have given him some more vocals. I liked his raspiness. He had that Rod Stewart quality.
Like, doesn't he sing Hooligan on Love Gun?
He does. Yeah.
That's a fantastic song. And then there's I can't remember which album it's on. Baby Driver.
Baby Driver's on Rock and Roll Over. Yeah. And I'm glad you held this up because this happens to be my favorite Kiss record.
Mine too, man.
Yours too?
I know.
See, this is the thing, everybody out there, like nobody's privy to our like conversations off camera, but it seems like we're like brothers from another mother. It's like whatever you say, Brendan's like, yeah, I totally agree. Like we were talking about Rat, the last video, and we're like, yeah, Dancing Undercover is my favorite album. And you're like, it's my favorite album too. So yeah.
Whereas most people would do, Out of the Cellar or something. I think you and I both tend to lean towards the lesser popular albums kind of thing. And I know that at least for myself, I tend to lean towards things that aren't overplayed, So, the Kiss album, and getting Rock and Roll All Night on every single, best of collection and stuff like that. It's like, I don't need that. I definitely enjoy the deeper cut type thing.
Right. Definitely. No, I totally agree with you. Yeah. And that's why, a lot of times I'm not listening to a lot of those, hits. I want to go for those, deeper cuts, those B-sides. So.
Right. So continuing on with this, what we brought up here on Peter Criss and sort of those influences that were starting to show the disco sound and what was going on, certainly in the time, but Kiss had not really brought that in, kind of a thing. The follow-up album, Dynasty, which certainly had the big #1, I Was Made for Loving You, a full-on, into disco. But the follow-up album, which I don't think gets the sort of notoriety that Dynasty does, continued that flair. And you and I were talking about it last night, that Vinnie Poncia is the producer of that album, produced Peter Criss's solo record, and they brought him in for Dynasty. And I think certainly with the success of I Was Made for Loving You and all of that, they had him return. But I know that they brought him in as sort of a way to placate Peter Criss. As you mentioned with the solo albums, that was done as a way to keep Ace Frehley and Peter Criss happy. Those guys wanting to branch out more and do solo things. And the Kiss guys said, well, let's keep the band together, but we'll all make solo records. And so it did prolong the life. And then other things that were done, like using Peter Criss's producer for these next two albums. But
Right.
I've always been a big fan of this record, yet it too falls in that vein of the more disco influenced albums of theirs.
Yeah, and like you and I were saying, this is a favorite of mine as well. And I know Unmasked, like you were saying, it tends to not be a favorite of Kiss fans, and even for a lot of people have never even heard this album in its entirety,
Mhm.
and they might even be Kiss fans. It's a very strange album though because it has a pop sheen to it.
Mhm.
The production's very crisp. It's a fun album. The cover is strange right off the bat because you're like, wait a second, Kiss Unmasked? We're taking their makeup off? What's going on?
Right.
And you and I were talking, it opens up with a cover song.
Yeah, right.
Is That You? And it's a great song, but it's like, why is Kiss doing a cover song? You know?
Right. Jared McMahon, Is That You?
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those artists that, I mean, I know a lot about music, you know a lot about music, but I'm unfamiliar with that artist. So
Mhm.
it just seems like a strange pairing of, people.
Right.
And then, of course, the second song, which I happen to like, I know it took you a while to warm up to, but Shandy,
Mhm.
I mean, it is total cheese pop. Like,
Right.
but so right off the bat, you get two, of these strange,
Cover song, yeah, and then you get a pop song, almost a ballad song, which
right,
to me both just very uncharacteristic of Kiss.
right.
But something I always liked about this was this has what, three Ace Frehley tunes on it.
Yeah, and it happens to have my favorite Ace Frehley song, Two Sides of the Coin.
Great song, yeah.
Such a great song. And I think that was, going back to the solo albums, I think Kiss realized like, hey, people are sort of gravitating towards Ace's album. I mean, it was probably the heaviest of all four.
Right.
And, he had come out with the song Shock Me.
Mhm.
He was singing more. I think they realized like, hey, we need to get Ace on the mic now.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and you were talking about Dynasty before. I mean, he sings 2000 Man on Dynasty.
I
He's
love that one.
Hard Time, Save Your Love. I mean, they were giving Ace a lot of microphone time. And I think it was
Right.
smart because he was starting to become, I think, a favorite amongst fans.
Right. Well, I mean, he had, the big hit with um
New York Group.
based on New York Groove. Right. Right. So I mean, it was sort of, coming off of that, and this being the first album that they did, Dynasty
Yeah.
back together on here. Yeah. It only makes sense that they did that. Another one I really liked off this album was Charisma, the Gene Simmons song.
Yeah, and it's funny because Gene only does Charisma and X-Ray Eyes on this. He only does two songs on the album. I think by this point, Gene was getting sort of tired of the whole Kiss thing, and I think he was getting bored a little bit and kind of wanting to move off into maybe different things. We had talked about him moving into movies and things like that.
Mhm.
So I think Paul Stanley was trying to keep the train going, and you can tell because Gene only sings two songs, but they're good songs.
Yeah.
It's just a shame that it was only two of them.
Right. Yeah, I think these two albums here are really, really good albums that are, end up being underrated a lot for these guys. But of course, I think the most underrated and or one that fans will be split on is The Elder. And I know you really like this album, right?
I really like this album. Now, when I got into Kiss, and even when, I saw them in '97 when they had the reunion tour, and I saw them for the Psycho Circus tour. I saw them for one of their 100 farewell tours. But I never really listened to this album. I wasn't familiar with it. This was like probably one of the last Kiss albums that I ever listened to and got into.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing is, you can't go into this album thinking it's a Kiss album because there's too many other things going on. Paul Stanley's vocal quality is different. The way he approaches the songs is different. They bring in some outside writers. They brought in Lou Reed on this album. There's some instrumental tracks. It's basically a concept record, and
Right.
it's nothing like Kiss. I mean, there is the song I, which is that sounds like a Kiss song.
Right.
And Oath is very, very heavy. That's got a heavy riff.
Yeah, that was always the song that drew me in, and Mr. Blackwell on here.
Yeah.
I really, really liked those. But One that I always liked was Only You. But interestingly, I didn't know that it was a Kiss song because I had heard Doro Pesh from Warlock cover that song on, I think it was a 1990 self-titled album that she did. And I knew that Gene Simmons, one of the reasons I was attracted to the album was I saw Gene Simmons was producer of the album and that he co-wrote a bunch of the songs with her. And then there was this song on there and I fell in love with that. And at that time, I didn't own The Elder. It wasn't until years later that I picked it up when I was completing the collection kind of a thing. And I was like, oh, that's a Kiss song, which has made me like this album more. And I did dive into this again last night. And listening to it last night, I enjoyed it far more than I ever have, kind of a thing. But like you said, I had to go into it thinking of it not as a Kiss album and just listening to it for the artistry that it is. And it's got a lot of peaks and valleys going from the orchestration that's in it and the slower style songs to the heavier style that are on here. And that, as you mentioned, it's a concept album, so it's telling a story and everything.
Right.
I think a lot of people thought it was going to be heavier. I mean, if you look at that cover and the title of it, The Elder, I think people were expecting a heavy album. And what year did it come out?
This was 1980. This came out in 1980, and I know after it was released, I think Kiss realized like, oh crap, I don't think we did the right thing. And I don't think they toured behind it. I don't think they really played any of the songs from the album. It was almost like, hey, we made this album, but let's just forget about it because
even if you've seen the video for A World Without Heroes, don't they have short hair and very flamboyant, disco-y, sequined outfits and everything? So, I mean, I actually think the song A World Without Heroes is great, but the video of it would be totally a turnoff, I think, if you're a hard rock Kiss fan.
Well, Gene cries at the end.
Does it? That's right, he does. That was always so cheesy.
Yeah, it was. But when they did it on the Unplugged album, you can tell the fans love that song. And I think there are a lot of people who they keep saying, play The Elder in its entirety. And Paul Stanley's like, what are you, crazy? Like, nobody likes this album. But, you have those hardcore fans that want to hear it.
I know. I mean, there are the diehards that love that kind of a thing. And I do think that if they did a modern day live version of it and sort of cleaned it up from that, really what was a late 70s sound. And I always felt this album came out a little too late in 1980, that if this album had come out during the punk rock and progressive rock stylings of the late 70s, 77, maybe even 78, along with like Styx and all that sort of stuff, I think the album could have been huge. It could have been a crossover hit the way Dynasty was with I Was Made for Loving You being a disco song. The Elder could have done that. It just came out a little too late on it. But listening to it, I'm like, there's hints of brilliance in it.
Oh, yeah.
And you're right. I do think if they did it live today, it would go over really well. One of my complaints with Kiss has always been that their set list just doesn't really change. Even if they change one or two songs in it, they don't do enough deep cuts. They just stick to the hits. And unfortunately, I think that means we will never see them do something like either one. They've never done an album in its entirety, playing live an album in its entirety. And that was such a big thing a few years back.
No, you're right. And that's an interesting point. I know that Paul Stanley teased the audience in one of their live performances. I don't know if I saw it on YouTube or if it's on the Kissology DVDs, but he plays the riff from The Oath.
Oh, yeah?
And all the fans are like, yeah, they're going to play. And then he just stops.
See, that's the worst. But it's like, I mean, I guess if they're teasing it to see what the reaction is, and then later, actually added it into the tour, meaning they had done that on some earlier dates kind of a thing. But I always hate it when they do that.
Here's the thing with this album, though. I think it's hard to play live. I think this goes into the category of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's. But that's why the Beatles had stopped touring. That was one of the reasons, because it was getting so intricate that it was hard to reproduce live. This album would have been very difficult to reproduce live because, I don't know. Kiss has gotten better playing live throughout the years, but in 1980, I don't know, where their chops were
Well, they would have had to have had a bunch of sidemen, I think, on
Yeah,
the stage to flesh it out, keyboard players and other things and
right.
stuff, maybe horn players and whatever. But it's yeah, I don't think it would have fit. And as you pointed out, they didn't tour for it. It just didn't catch on. So I mean, it was kind of unfortunately sort of dead in the water with it.
And I wanted to go back to something you had said with like the hints of disco in the Peter Criss album.
Right.
There was actually more hints of disco on Double Platinum,
Hmm.
which came out before Dynasty, because the first song they redid Strutter. It's Strutter 78.
Which
And
I love that version far better than the one on the debut.
yeah, but listen to the drums. It's more of a disco beat to it. So
Maybe that's why I liked it so much. I've always
yeah,
liked
I
it
think it was
better.
just, I don't, this is why I think Paul Stanley,
Mhm.
he's a genius at what he does, because the story was Paul Stanley, and this is about I Was Made for Loving You. He
Right.
was into a bunch of disco songs. He's like, wait a second, I can do that. I can write one of these songs.
Right.
And he wrote it, and it became a huge hit. So he just
Only number one.
writing a melody
Mhm.
and
I
a
mean,
song.
keeping on that vein, Dan, I mean, I agree. Paul Stanley is a genius at what he does. And we'll jump ahead then to talk about the two albums that he spearheaded. I mean, they hadn't done anything since before, post Psycho Circus when they did Sonic Boom. But he had made his solo album. And Gene heard that and realized that with Live to Win, Paul Stanley is great at what he does, and if he could bring that to a Kiss album, so he let him take over the reins and run with these. And these, I think, are great albums. It just shows how great Paul Stanley is at what he does.
Definitely. And, looking at these two albums, I tend to like Sonic Boom a little bit better.
Mhm.
Um, I
Same
believe,
artist did
yeah,
Rock and Roll Over, did this one.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah.
I remember reading that.
Hmm.
I think what was cool about this is that they sort of, I want to say they just recorded live in the studio. So it sort of has that live vibe to it.
Hmm. More of
Um,
a band effort, recording it.
yeah, it's a little bit more loose.
Mhm.
The production is a little bit more open. It's not as dry, not as it's not. I'm going to use the term clean. It's not as clean. There's a little bit
Right.
of grit to it, which is good.
Mhm.
But it opens up with Modern Day Delilah, which should have been a huge hit. I mean, it was sort of a hit for Kiss, but
Right.
the song should have been bigger.
The song on Sonic Boom that I love the best, which has actually stayed in their repertoire now for the last 13 plus years, or
Yeah,
sorry, no, 12 plus years, for 2009. Say Yeah, the closing track on here, I think
yeah,
is classic sounding Kiss. I thought it when I first heard it, kind of a thing, but I'm glad to see that they've actually kept that in their set list. I mean, Kiss has had such a thing for, they put out an album, they promote it, and then they don't carry any of those tracks over and continue doing them,
yeah,
kind of a thing. So I was always really glad to see that. But for me, both of these records, more than anything, with having Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer wearing the makeup from the classic guys, not giving them their own makeup, but here at least these guys were both allowed to sing. So I felt it legitimized a bit of having those guys in the band wearing these, classic, the makeup, the faces, and
yeah,
everything by having them sing because, Mark St. John didn't sing on an album, and Vinnie Vincent didn't sing on an album. And all the way up until the very end, Bruce Kulick only sang on Carnival of Souls.
right.
And in my opinion, not very, very strong vocally on it. I was glad that he did it just from the standpoint of finally hearing another band member sing, kind of a
Right.
thing. But I feel like the way they did this here, it finally sort of justified all that. How do you feel about these guys wearing the makeup? I know that's always a big, big, Kiss debate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It bothered me at first. I think the longer it goes on, I think I just am used to it now. And I think the thing is that Kiss is not pretending that they're Peter, Chris, and Ace Frehley. They are saying, "Hey, this is Tommy Thayer. This is Eric Singer. They're wearing the makeup." It's not, they're not. I guess they are kind of pretending to be like Ace and Peter, but um, I mean, I don't have a huge deal with it. I mean, I think it bothered me like when it first started. I don't know. I almost feel that I don't know. They could have performed without the makeup for these.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they didn't at the point when it was sort of the farewell tour with Peter, Chris, and
Yeah,
in
just take the
2000.
makeup off.
Just
Yeah,
take the makeup. And they actually did. They had fully intended to do that. And I don't know what happened, but essentially they decided, why should they stop and
yeah,
go back? And Gene's explanation for it, and it makes sense, is that, football teams have different players all the time wearing the same jerseys, and they don't change
yeah,
the band, the sports team name, and they don't
right,
change, different jerseys all the time. They do occasionally retire jerseys, but
right,
it's a good point. It's just because Kiss had already created new characters around Eric Carr as
right,
the Fox and Vinnie Vincent and the Ankh.
right.
I wanted them to have, I was like, there's precedent for creating new characters. You should have created new characters. But
Yeah,
this was also in a time frame of the, late 90s, early 2000s, where people wanted the classic. They wanted the original thing, and people weren't really paying attention to who are the band members. So they
well,
knew they could put these guys on the stage, and most people will show up thinking it's an original lineup.
right.
They're not lying about it. It's just they're also not, announcing that it isn't.
And most people wouldn't care. I mean, you have the people like you and I or other music fans who say, wait a second, that's not Peter Chris, that's not Ace. But the casual fan, you're right, is not really going to care. They're just going to see Kiss up on stage and go, yeah, this is great. And they're not really going to think too much about who the members are.
And the fact, I think, for me, that Eric Singer, who was a member without the makeup in the band,
Yeah,
coming back in and putting on makeup that was somebody else's makeup, I felt like he really deserved his own, more so than even Tommy Thayer, because Tommy Thayer came in only wearing makeup. He never didn't wear makeup. He was never part of the band in that. He had a lot of dealings. In fact, he put together the history books and those
okay,
the I don't know where they called history, the DVDs and
yeah,
Blu-rays, that whole package. I mean, he was their like in-house merchandising guy that coordinated and did all of that sort of stuff for them
right.
for all through the 90s kind of thing. And he was a perfect guy to come in because he had, not only of course played in Black and Blue, which is, big, fantastic band in their own right sort of a thing, but he had been playing Ace Frehley and cover bands and stuff. So he had it all down pat kind of a thing.
And what's interesting, you and I had talked a little bit about this, is that right now, Kiss is 50%, non-original members.
Right.
So I've heard the urban legend that Kiss wants to, go on forever and just have different people wearing the makeup
Mhm.
and be forever Kiss, just keep going. Because technically, you could just have people put the makeup on and, Kiss could just go on from generation to generation to generation. I mean,
They
I
would
don't
be
know how I feel
perfect.
about that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how I feel about that either kind of a thing. You have those groups like the Blue Man Group, and then there's Trans-Siberian Orchestra, where the people that are up there aren't the guys that wrote it and are playing
Right,
it. And
right,
that's been accepted, and people do that kind of a thing. And tribute bands are so popular. I mean, if
right.
nothing else, if Kiss sort of rebranded it as the official tribute band or something to that nature, I think
Yeah,
that it could certainly work. Now, with it being Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer right now, and if Gene or Paul individually, one steps down and they replace him, and
right.
then years from now, the next one steps down, and they continue in that regard, but they have to continue to record. For me, I can't get behind a band that is just guys playing it, unless they're going to call themselves a tribute band kind of
Right.
a thing. And so, because there are these two albums now with Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer, and of course Eric Singer having been with them without the makeup, I could get behind it. But at the same time, Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons are really the driving force and the sound and everything. And not having them there, I think they might just, they just kind of be a shell of their former selves. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know how interested people are. I mean, you and I are, but I don't know how interested people are in new Kiss material because
Yeah.
would probably tell you when we play live, people don't want to hear anything off of Sonic Boom.
Well, right. Most artists will tell you that if they play something new, that's when people go to the restroom or to get the
Right.
beer, refill.
And the thing is, I mean, it takes a lot of work to go in and make an album. I mean, for every step of the way. And in their defense, why are they going to put themselves through that if A, no one's really going to buy the album, B, no one's going to get excited about it, and C, no one wants to hear us play these songs live. So what's the point?
Yeah, and I completely understand that from the artist standpoint. Why put all that time and energy into it if no one's going to, listen to it and hear it? But what I'll say is there's plenty of other artists, and Iron Maiden is a classic example of this, that when they put out a brand new album and they go on tour, they play 5 or 6 songs off of it, and they generally open the first 3 or 4 songs are from the new album.
Right.
And what they do is they just alternate tours. The tour that's promoting the album plays a lot of the new material and not as many of the hits, but they always, a year or two later, do the tour of nothing but the hits, or the retro tour. And they've proven that doing that, their fans will come out still in droves to hear the new material because they know later they're going to get those hits, kind of a thing.
Right.
Kiss is just sort of banking on the fact that nobody wants to hear it. But I think if you took a stance and you promoted it and you played it regardless, and you played it over and over so people could get used to it, because you're not hearing it on the radio, you're not seeing it on TV. The only place you're going to get to hear it and get used to it so that it becomes a hit, in your mind, something that you remember, is live. And if they're not going to do that, then it's not going to sell. It's not going to be something people are going to want to hear. But I know that the song Say Yeah off Sonic Boom, which they've kept in the catalog, apparently goes down like gangbusters live in concert. It's just a big sing-along chanting style song, but it's because Kiss put it in there and made it that.
And that's the thing. I mean, Black Diamond wouldn't have become a hit unless they played the crap out of it. And that's what they did every night. They played Black Diamond, Black Diamond, Black Diamond, and people learned it, and that's the thing. It's not going to become a hit unless you keep playing it.
So as we're wrapping things up here, we talked already about whether or not Kiss could continue. I certainly think they could, and I know the band members have talked about it. They are on a never-ending farewell tour that at some point is supposed to end. Does that mean Kiss actually ends, or does it just mean this lineup of Kiss ends? I think we'll have to wait and see about that. I think I just want to wrap this up by saying, or asking the question, do you think if a band like Kiss came out today in the makeup and all of that, could they pull that off and be as successful as Kiss has been?
I think they actually could if it was done right, because, think about the band Ghost. I mean, there was so much publicity behind Ghost. You didn't know who they were. And this sort of, vibe, and people were, whispering in alleys about them. And it was like this big thing. And the thing though, is that Kiss was a cultural phenomenon though. So I don't know of any other band like Kiss since. So part of me wants to say yes, but the other part of me is like, I don't think that a band could get as big as Kiss. I mean, Kiss was everywhere. Everybody knew who Kiss was.
I mean, they were essentially as big as the Beatles at a certain point in time. And having fans of each individual member and that sort of stuff, and the merchandising alone on it. I mean, I do think a lot of this had to do with the 1970s and the way things were done. And today, with the internet and the immediacy and the access to all of this, would take it away. Kiss was actually able to not get their identities let out. The media respected that. Even when the media were invited in to do interviews, they weren't covered up. The media just agreed not to take photos of them. But I don't think you'd have that kind of respect today. So it'd be a lot harder to have that sort of, ooh, who are these guys kind of a thing. I mean, Slipknot did it for a while, but we all very quickly learned out who those guys were, and they didn't intend to hide that forever, kind of a thing. So yeah, I'm in agreement. I think that it could work, and it has worked in some degree, but whether or not we would ever have a band as big as Kiss would be, question.
I mean, I can't think of a band right now that is woven into popular culture like Kiss was. I mean, Kiss was on cereal boxes. Kiss was on commercials. Kids were wearing Kiss t-shirts.
Yeah.
Mom and dads were going. It was a family event.
Well, today you can buy a Kiss coffin and bury yourself in it. So, I mean, you can do everything.
Yeah, I bought one. It's actually, no, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding. But yeah, I can't think of another band besides the Beatles, but we're talking about modern day bands.
Modern day, yeah.
Day
It's still
band
going
that's,
on kind of thing.
yeah, I can't think of one.
Yeah. So, sort of final thoughts on all of this. I do think that Kiss is much more than just the music and theatrics. It's a combination of everything. A lot of people, always say, well, without the theatrics, Kiss isn't the biggest musical band or something like that. So would they have done it? But I think the music does stand on its own, and I think that the 1980s proved that. They took off the makeup and they were able to do that. And there's so many phases and styles within Kiss. Definitely worth exploring. I mean, it's nothing against AC/DC, who puts out the great albums they do, but those are extremely consistent, whereas Kiss took chances and tried different things. So I think Kiss is so much more than just its theatrics, its image, and or just its music. It's a great combination of all of that. Any final thoughts on your end?
No, I agree with you. I think, Kiss did take chances. And I mean, think about the album Carnival of Souls. That was basically their grunge album. And,
Right.
it's sort of forgotten about. We talked about The Elder. We talked about doing disco songs.
Right.
So, yeah, I think they were constantly, obviously they changed their costumes with each album.
Right.
They changed their show. So I think they were constantly reinventing themselves. Which gave them life through the years.
And 1970 Wicked Lester, who they started as before forming Kiss in 73, kind of a thing. So I mean, they're at 51 plus years, Paul and Gene are, as far as this is concerned, and Kiss is about to have its 50th anniversary. So I mean, a band that has been around for 50 years, I certainly think answers that question, that they are definitely more than just the music.
Well, I think the other thing too is who they influence. They've influenced, and Garth Brooks has said it. Garth Brooks, the country singer, he was influenced by Kiss.
Yeah.
Anthrax, the thrash band, was influenced by Kiss.
Yeah.
So you have varied musical genres that have been influenced by Kiss.
Very true.
It's they were a very influential band. Whether you like them or not, you have to admit that they were influential.
Very true. Absolutely. So I think we'll bring this first episode of the CD and Vinyl Guys to a close as we discussed Kiss here. And I'd like to ask everyone to, check back. We're going to be doing more of these sort of things here. And don't forget to head over to Chris Propfe's channel itself. Check him out. And as I said at the beginning, if you hadn't already clicked on, subscribe to my channel, please do. But also leave comments. Let us know what you think about what we talked about here tonight. Your favorite albums. Did you like the disco era? Did you like The Elder? What do you think about these guys, Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer, wearing the makeup, and just all those sort of things? I mean, there's so much out on Kiss that we could debate on this, and we'll probably do a part 2 to this, but otherwise we're going to wrap this up here. That's right. That's the
buy this album. It's the best one. Buy this album.
All right. I think we'll bring this to a close here, everyone, and take care. We'll talk to you guys real soon. Bye-bye.